let's move on. I'd love to talk to Javier.
Javier?
Javier in Florida. It is a veganism call, everyone. Get ready. It says veganism and whether secular humanism has any effect on the view of veganism. Javier, you're live with Eric and V.
Hello?
Hey!
Hi, nice to, thank you for letting me on the show. I've been catching up with a couple of episodes and I'm excited to call in.
Cheers! Nice. So I do want to preface this. This is not Talk Vegan. And the reason I say that is because if we take, in taking this call, I guarantee you, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to get a dozen vegan callers, each episode, and have to tell them, hey, we're going to reserve a week or, reserve some time specifically for vegan calls. So we'd love to have this conversation, but just for those watching, just give us time. We can't dedicate as much time to veganism.
Well, the reason that this is interesting, Javier, is because you say that you're a theist. And so I have not had very many conversations about veganism with theists. It does tend to be a conversation had within certain atheist circles. So that's why I'm curious about this call.
What gets me is it talks about secular humanism, and there are theists who are secular humanists, but that's not guaranteed. So is this a view of an outside group?
And there are also people who don't call themselves humanists anymore because they are vegan, and humanism excludes things that aren't human.
Javier, who the hell are you?
Yeah, tell us more about your question.
Okay, who the hell am I? Well, this is I'm Batman, but no, I'm serious.
No. So first off, are you a vegan?
No, I am not a vegan, and I wouldn't squarely put myself in the anti-vegan category, but I am maximally certain that I will never be a vegan.
Okay, and when you want to talk about secular humanism, do you consider yourself a secular humanist?
Well, I'm not secular because I'm a theist.
Well,
but
actually, what if I push back on that?
What if we save that for another time?
Fine.
And get to the question.
Okay.
All right, Javier.
Okay. And so many good conversations, but only so much time in the day. But yeah. So I am a theist. I currently feel most comfortable in the camp of Protestant, although I would say that I am basically, I won't say on the fence about being religious. I'm more like a little nudge in either direction could probably keep me there. But onto the topic of veganism, I do interact with a couple of vegan, I'll say, acquaintances. And I've also been listening to a couple of conversations between atheists and vegan. I know those aren't mutually exclusive categories, but I mean conversations between atheists and some of whom happen to be vegan.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious as to whether or not atheism in and of itself has an effect on someone's view toward veganism, and whether or not secular humanism may add something, subtract something, etc.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
This is a good question.
And I'm going to talk forever. V, please go first. Otherwise, I'm not going to stop talking until we're out of time.
Well, Javier, I want to preface this by saying that neither of us are vegans, although we had a 4-hour conversation yesterday that ended up with us coming to some interesting conclusions about things. So it's a conversation we constantly have with between the two of us and with our friends, many of whom are vegan. I have a vegan friend, so I do want to preface everything that I'm saying with that understanding. For me, I see the trajectory in terms of reasoning, especially if you started out as some kind of theist, some kind of religious person, moved into atheism, found secular humanism, and became a vegan as a result. To me, there feels like there is a chain of kind of logical steps, moving towards that not everybody experiences. But from my understanding, it starts with humans are special for some reason because they are God's children, because they were given some kind of dominion over the universe, something, or over the planet. And that seems very consistent with very many forms of religion that are prevalent today. Once you leave that behind, and that religion specifically, that feeling of humans being special can continue for a long time or just in perpetuity if you don't look at it, because it feels like a separate category than whether or not a God exists. But it's intertwined because those two things were taught to you simultaneously. So once you start questioning that, are humans special? Then you have conversations around, well, what might make a human special if we no longer believe in a God-ordained dominion or in a soul? So that becomes a conversation around consciousness or the ability to feel pain or the ability to experience qualia, which is what we talked about yesterday. So all of these kind of categories of things that make humans different kind of come up. And then what you end up doing is looking and seeing, oh, other things fit these categories or seem to most of the time. So then maybe we aren't special. Maybe we are just one more different kind of animal that exists on this planet. And then comes that last piece, which is, should we then be treating other kinds of animals, other species, as though they are food as opposed to on an equal playing field, I guess? And maybe that's where I mess up, because that's the piece that I don't have yet, right? I haven't fully gone there. And so, I can't believe I'm saying this, vegans of the internet, if I got that wrong, please tell me where in that chain that went wrong, if that reflected your experience, or, what you experienced in that process from deconversion to becoming a vegan through a secular humanist viewpoint. But all that to say, Javier, does that make any sense? Does that kind of follow for you?
Yeah, it does. It is something that I've been thinking, because I guess you could say I'm currently on what some people would call a spiritual journey. And I've considered basically what you mentioned, where if humans are nothing special, there's nothing magical about them, as I like to put it, then we're really just animals. And because I'm, I may be religious, but my favorite topic in the whole world is biology. So I've had the understanding that humans are animals for quite some time now, And yeah, like I'm very much reminded of that passage in the book of Acts, where I don't remember specifically. It's been a while since I've read it. Where like God showed Paul a vision of all the animals on a sheet in heaven.
That was Peter. But yes,
Peter. Yeah, sorry. I guess my being on the fence is showing right now. But yeah, where he said, "Oh, everything is clean to eat." And whatever. And even as back when I was more firm on the Christian side, that really didn't mean much to me in terms of not being vegan. I really think that regardless of whether or not you're special and you have divine permission to eat other things or other animals, that's a choice that you should come to on your own based on your own standards of morality where applicable. So I do understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. Eric, thoughts?
Yeah. So I do just want to caveat that what V outlined is a really, really good example of how that path can happen. Lots of people take different routes, but that is definitely the one that stands out to both of us the most, is as the most common. But what I'm interested in is you're wondering whether or not secular humanism plays into it, and if secular humanism has an effect on veganism. So is that still kind of what you want to know? I want to make sure that we're still tracking.
Yeah, I'm not going to presume that you two speak for all secular humanists, but if you are secular humanists, I would really like to hear your opinion on the subject.
Sure. Yeah. Javier, I think you are secular more than you are religious. I think brushing your teeth is a secular activity. I think driving your car is a secular activity. Eating breakfast, going to the restroom, taking a shower. All of those things are not distinctly, specifically religious. That which is not religious is secular. And so I've met many religious secular humanists. You can be that. Secular humanism is just your humanism, you're human, you are valuing human life, but you're not doing it necessarily or only because God told you to. You value human life for its own sake, and you're going to treat it with that kind of compassion and respect. I think that as I've talked to vegan friends, they didn't eschew that. They just expanded it. They went, I want to add more things into this bucket of things that I want to treat with that compassion and respect. And so calling themselves secular humanists would still apply, but it was no longer as accurate of a descriptor. They, you know, it wasn't as encompassing as it should be.
Yeah.
Which is why several people that I know who are atheists, who I know are secular humanists, don't consider themselves such because they've found better descriptors.
Yeah. So secular humanism puts a priority on respecting other people's autonomy, right? And the ability to consent to things, right? At this core, that's kind of the basis of that. And so I think I agree with you, Javier, that every person should come to this kind of conclusion based on their own moral understanding and the way that they have followed those personal ethics, because to suggest that my ethics must be shared by other people just because I think that's right is no longer secular humanism, because it does not respect consent and autonomy. So I think that when someone enters into this worldview of secular humanism and then no longer sees humans as special, just the next step is to offer that consent and that autonomy to things other than humans. So it's just an extension of that for a lot of people. And that's kind of...
Yeah. And other people might define secular humanism as, you know, believing in the primacy of, you know, humans over other creatures. And if that's their definition...
I have never heard that before.
I can imagine that's going to be in our comments.
That would be very interesting. If that's how you define humanism, oh my goodness.
If that's how you define humanism, though, this conversation is not going to apply to you. So we don't, you know, we can't define secular humanism for everyone. All we can do is offer you, Javier, our understanding of it and interact with it there.
Yeah. Does that answer some of your questions?
Yes, it does. Thank you for your answers. And to Eric, I see what you mean when you say that I'm more so secular than religious. And in complete honesty, most of my understanding of the world and my moral system, you know, just speaking frankly, is more so secular. Because, like I said, I don't deny anything that is biologically true about humans or the world or anything like that. Yeah. My creationist days are far behind me. And
well, that's good.
And my my moral system is, I guess you could say, functionally secular humanist in most cases. I guess with like a big exception that also kind of ties into the vegan question is, for example, and maybe some people will agree with me, maybe some people don't. I value my dog more than a random human, for example, and that may sound like a horrible statement to some people, maybe some other people disagree.
Yeah, it's honest though,
and it's reasonable, I think, frankly, because what we do here's the other piece of that, which is kind of where that other side kind of comes into play. We grow attached to the people in our location or the things closest to us, right? The availability bias is real. And what that means is that you think you found the one, and it just so happens that the one, your soulmate, everywhere in the world happens to be in your hometown. No, like you've picked somebody because of that availability bias, because of that proximity. And so when you're talking about, I would prefer my dog to a random human, yes, of course, that dog is closer to you. That dog has more interactions with you, therefore you prefer it. In general, humans have more interaction with other humans and certain kinds of domestic animals than they do with animals that would typically be eaten. And so there's this other component here, which is interesting to talk about. Okay, well, it feels more natural for me to prefer humans and maybe dogs and cats than it does for me to equally prefer a cow or a sheep or a pig. But that often gets flipped on its head if you go to certain like farms where they like preserve them and like save them from stuff, and then you spend a lot of time with those like pigs. You're like, oh, actually these are like rescues. Dogs, right? So I totally get it. If you prefer your dog to somebody you've never met, Yes, of course. That's how our brains work. But that also plays into why it's difficult to get to veganism for a lot of people, because they aren't available. They aren't in proximity to the kinds of creatures that we're commonly talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And there's so much more. Honestly, it was a multi-hours long conversation.
And I feel like I'm talking out of my ass too, because I, again, am not a vegan myself, but I get it a lot more than I used to because I've talked about it a lot with people, and I want to continue to learn about it. So,
well, as three non-vegans having a conversation about veganism, if you are a vegan, write down in the comments what you think. Did we all get it entirely wrong? And if we did, how? Let us know. We want to be the best hosts we can. We want to represent and talk about viewpoints charitably and with as much, knowledge as we can, afford it. Javier, can I leave you with one thing?
Sure.
Early on, you said that you said that you were kind of a nudge away. You're kind of on the fence, right?
Mm-hmm.
My advice to you is resist the nudge. The time to accept something as true is when you're convinced. And it's nobody gets nudged into being convinced. Take as much time as you need to research these things, to look into it and really come away with conclusions that you feel confident in. And then once you've done that, say, hey, here's where I'm at. Because there are a lot of people who will say, oh, I'm now on this side because I've been nudged. And it doesn't help them in the long run. And so I would much rather you abstain, take your time and research, and come up with a conclusion that you feel confident in. And if it's a religious one, you call back and then we can have a conversation about it.
All right, then. Thank you for taking my call. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully my schedule will let me call back next week, talk about a non-vegan topic. Have a good day, guys.
Sounds
you
good.
Too.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Right. Resist the nudge.
I disagree.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I got nudged a bunch of different times in different areas and being like, oh, that's an interesting nudge. I'm going to follow that down that path. Oh, I just discovered something I didn't know before. I wouldn't have gone there if I had resisted the nudge.
So then let me clarify. Follow all of the paths. Just don't become set in thinking that this is what reality is every time you get nudged. Right? Take it tentatively. Right. Take each of those things tentatively. When you were following those things, when you were following all these different avenues that were interesting you, you weren't necessarily saying, well, this is reality and it's, every single time. You were going, well, crap, I need to learn more about this. I have no idea. You were, in the way that I'm trying to describe it, you were still resisting that. It's when you settle into, a dogmatic view of things, that's when I think you stop looking.
Right. Don't let a nudge get you straight into dogma.
Yeah.
Each nudge is one step. You have to take a lot of steps to get to a different place.
Agreed. And by the time you get there, you're not a nudge away.
Ooh, you're always a nudge away, and you're never just a nudge away.
We've said nudge way too many times.
It's a word now.
All right, I picked the last two. Who are we talking to next?
I want to talk to Phoenix.
Okay.